Switzerland is home to over 1,500 crystal clear lakes, some of the most stunning waterfalls in Europe, and towering mountains that cover 60% of the country's landscape. From the majestic Matterhorn to the mesmerizing Rhine Falls, it's like stepping into a world where nature shows off at every turn. Think of walking through ancient villages with medieval castles on one side and cascading waterfalls on the other. Whether you're looking for adventure or tranquility, this country has it all. But with so many breathtaking sights, where do you even begin your journey? It is a land of towering mountains, breathtaking views, and fairy tale landscapes. This small country, perhaps, is no wonder that people dream to visit from all over this small place in Europe. What makes this country special to me is the extraordinary ability of balancing its untouched natural beauty with charming man-made wonders. But when one speaks of natural things, perhaps nothing symbolizes Switzerland like the Swiss Alps. Standing on the mountaintop, feeling the crisp cold air fill your lungs as the view is absorbed. A sea of peaks stretches in every direction, snow-capped summits stretching as far as the eye can see, and underfoot, glaciers twisting and turning like ancient rivers of ice. The Alps aren't just mountains, they are living, breathing giants, shaping both the landscape and the people who live in this place. The mountains cover almost 60% of the country, part and parcel of Switzerland's identity. The Matterhorn is perhaps one of the most iconic peaks. If you ever saw a photo of the Swiss Alps, then you most likely saw this pyramid-shaped giant in the distance. It's just like a painting of perfection. Sharp edges, towering height. Perfect for photogenic-minded adventure seekers. But that's not all about the Matterhorn. Its climbing routes are the world's most difficult, and professionals from all over the world come here every year to test how far they can take their limits. Some of them succeed, while others do not, rendering the beauty of the Matterhorn as deadly as the mountain itself is beautiful. But the Matterhorn is only the tip of the iceberg, for in Switzerland, mountains are multitudinous, and each one bears its own tale. Take Jungfrau, the top of Europe, not so much because of its altitude, but because of the fantastic railway that carries you to the top. Now, this was no ordinary train ride. It is an experience, taking you along the heart of Swiss Alps, rocking through tunnels carved into mountainsides, and providing views that make you speechless. On top, you find this place surrounded by peaks dusted with snow, appearing endless. When you peer to one side, there comes this overwhelming feeling that you stand atop the world, like standing on the roof of Europe itself. But behind this snow and rock, there is an obscured history running thousands of years deep. Masses of ice, like the Great Aletsch Glacier, have been scratching away valleys and sculpting the mountains over millions of years and leaving behind almost an extraterrestrial landscape. For instance, the Aletsch Glacier is the largest in the Alps, but it's not a pretty sight. It is a living history. While this glacier slowly runs down the mountainside, it carries along it tons of air trapped for centuries in ice. In fact, these air pockets are similar to time capsules that provide science with a view of what Earth's climate was hundreds or even thousands of years ago. It's really amazing to consider that secrets of Earth's past reside inside these ancient ice rivers. But glaciers are important, not only as a means of reconstructing what happened in the past, but also as an important part of Switzerland's future. Climate change is melting these glaciers at a breathless rate, and this effect is already felt. The Trift Glacier, once an ice block accessible without much effort, has dramatically shrunk over the last few decades. Crossing a suspension bridge to see what remains of the glacier today, a reminder of how fast things are changing. Swiss responded to it by building structures like the Trift Bridge to let people see it before it is gone. Standing on that bridge, looking out at an ice mass that in our lifetime may not be around anymore, is not a pleasant feeling. The Alps aren't just glaciers and towering peaks though, they're also full of life. Perhaps one of the most incredible animals to call home in these mountains is the alpine ibex. If you have not heard of this creature, imagine a wild goat, but with huge curved horns that look something out of a medieval painting. An ibex is a mountain master. They can climb almost vertically up rock walls and leap more than 6 feet straight up. Honestly, it's just kind of mind-blowing to watch them move through the really rough terrain, like they're walking in a moon landscape or something, as if mountains were made for him. And to many degrees they were. Their hooves are perfectly shaped in order to grab onto these narrow ledges and make a detour from the path, which even the most experienced hikers will think longingly of, going up steep cliffs covered with rocky outcrops. Still, however, the story of the alpine ibex is much more than a saga of survival. It is also a story of a conservation success. In the early 19th century, these majestic animals nearly became extinct. People believed that their horns had medicinal properties and their meat was prized. Fortunately, good conservation efforts and a restriction on hunting brought back the ibex population from the brink of extinction. Today, more than 55,000 of these magnificent creatures inhabit the Alps, the living evidence of what happens when man and nature come to an understanding. And while talking about wildlife, the Alps are home to this gigantic bird called the golden eagle. Golden eagles are indeed the undisputed kings of the skies, because with their wings spread wide, these birds soar above the mountains high into the sky. When you see a golden eagle flying, you are really caught by their entire performance. These birds are really skillful hunters. They can snatch up rabbits and squirrels from an altitude of thousands of feet using just sharp-taloned wings for softening up their meat. More amazing still, however, are their eyesight. A golden eagle can spot a rabbit from miles away. As the prey approaches in silent swooping, it's already too late for them. In Greek mythology, the golden eagle was the personal messenger of Zeus, the king of the gods. If the towering peaks and the glaciers of Swiss Alps had left you in awe, wait till you visit the lakes of Switzerland. They claim that the mountains of Switzerland make you feel small, but the lakes make you feel as if the world has been slowed for you. And, believe me, all these water jewels are distributed throughout the country, more than 1,500 in all, and each of them shines with its own charm and uniqueness. Of course, the most famous is Lake Geneva. You may have been exposed to photographs of this legendary lake with the city of Geneva in the foreground and the snow-capped Alps in the background. Something magic occurs when you're standing on the shore of the lake, watching sunlight dance across the water. The sheer scale of Lake Geneva is unbelievable. It's the largest lake in Switzerland and one of the largest lakes in Europe. As you stand there, it almost feels like the sea. No wonder why people have been attracted to it for thousands of years. Lake Geneva isn't just a pretty face though. It has a long history, stretching back to the time of the Romans, who once settled along its shores. The lake has always been a center of activity, whether it's the bustling city of Geneva on one side or the peaceful vineyards of Lavaux on the other. These vineyards are another wonder of the area. Their steep, terraced slopes carved into the hillsides, producing some of Switzerland's finest wines. It's the combination of the lake's mild climate and the rich, fertile soil left behind by glaciers that makes this place so special. Standing in the vineyards, sipping a glass of local wine, and gazing over the shimmering water is an experience you won't forget anytime soon. But Lake Geneva isn't the only lake worth exploring in Switzerland. Head over to the Bernese Oberland and you will find two of the most beautiful lakes in the country, Lake Brein and Lake Thun. These lakes are pure magic. Both are surrounded by towering mountains, and their vibrant turquoise waters seem almost too bright to be real. It is like something out of a painting. The color of the water comes from tiny particles of glacial sediment that get carried down from the mountains by streams and rivers. When the sunlight hits the lake, the water glows with this incredible shade of blue-green that's impossible to describe unless you see it for yourself. Lake Brein in particular feels like a hidden treasure. It's quieter than Lake Geneva, and there's a sense of serenity here that's hard to find anywhere else. You can take a boat ride across the lake, and as you glide over the calm waters, you'll pass by charming Swiss villages nestled along the shore. One of the highlights is the Waterfalls, a series of stunning waterfalls that tumble down into the lake from the cliffs above. There's even a historic hotel near the falls, where you can sit on the terrace and enjoy the sound of rushing water as you take in the view. Just across the hill from Lake Brein is Lake Thun, another beauty that's just as enchanting. Lake Thun has a bit more history woven into its shores. As you explore the area, you'll come across castles like Oberhofen Castle and Thun Castle, which have stood guard over the lake for centuries. Thun Castle, with its towering turrets, looks like something out of a fairy tale, and climbing up to the top gives you panoramic views of the lake and the Alps in the distance. It is easy to imagine what life was like here hundreds of years ago, with knights and nobility wandering the halls, all while the peaceful lake shimmered below. But perhaps the most intriguing thing about Lake Thun is the secret it hides beneath the waters. After World War II, the Swiss government dumped thousands of tons of unused munitions into the lake. Yep, you read that right. Deep down on the lakebed, thousands of pieces of military equipment still rest, locked away in the cold, oxygen-poor waters where they've been safely contained. It is a strange but fascinating bit of history that adds a mysterious element to this already stunning place. Of course, Switzerland isn't just about the big lakes. There are also dozens of smaller, high-altitude lakes scattered throughout the Alps. These lakes, like Oceanen Lake in the Bernese Alps, are the real hidden gems. But as beautiful as these lakes are, they're not immune to the effects of climate change. Even the famous Lake Geneva is not untouched by environmental changes. As the climate warms, scientists are keeping a close eye on the lake's ecosystem, particularly the impact on its water quality and the creatures that call it home. Switzerland may seem like an untouched paradise, but even here, the effects of global warming are making their presence felt. As we move from the lakes back to the mountains, there is another hidden treasure that deserves a mention: the mountain lakes of the Swiss Alps. These high-altitude lakes, like Lake Sils and Lake Silvaplana in the Engadin Valley, are some of the most beautiful and pristine places you'll ever visit. The crystal clear water reflects on the surrounding peaks perfectly, creating a mirror-like effect that's almost hypnotic. And because these lakes are fed by glacial meltwater, they remain cold and clean year-round, making them perfect for a refreshing dip after a long hike. Lake Silvaplana in particular is famous for its windsurfing and kitesurfing, thanks to the Maloja wind that sweeps through the valley. Watching the brightly colored sails dancing across the water against the backdrop of the mountains is a sight to behold. And just a short distance away is Lake Sils, a much more serene spot that's perfect for sailing or simply sitting on the shore and taking in the view. The contrast between the two lakes, so close together yet offering completely different experiences, is one of the many reasons why Switzerland's lakes are so special. Switzerland's lakes, like its mountains, are full of surprises. They're not just pretty postcards. They're living, breathing parts of the landscape, each with its own story, history, and secrets. Whether it's the bustling shores of Lake Geneva, the quiet beauty of Lake Brein, or the high-altitude serenity of Lake Sils, there's a lake in Switzerland for everyone. And no matter which one you visit, you're sure to find yourself falling in love with the peaceful, timeless beauty of Switzerland's most precious natural wonders. If there's one thing Switzerland knows how to do, it's creating landscapes that seems like they're straight out of a fantasy world. And the waterfalls here are no exception. They're everywhere, from the dramatic roaring Rhine falls to the more peaceful hidden gems tucked away in remote valleys. Each waterfall has its own personality, its own story, and they're a big part of what makes Switzerland such a captivating place to visit. Which brings us to one of the most famous and powerful waterfalls in all of Europe, Rhine Falls. Located near the town of Schaffhausen in northern Switzerland, the Rhine Falls is a lovely force of nature. I remember the first time I stood near the edge of the falls. The sound of the water crashing over the rocks was so loud you could feel it vibrating in your chest. The sheer volume of water flowing over the falls is mind-blowing. 600,000 gallons per second during peak flow. It's no wonder people come here from all over the world to see this incredible display of nature's power. Standing on one of the viewing platforms, you're so close to the action that you can feel the mist on your face. And if you're feeling really adventurous, you can take a boat tour that gets you right up to the base of the falls. Trust me, it's an unforgettable experience. There's something both humbling and exhilarating about being that close to such raw, unstoppable energy. And just when you think the scene couldn't get more dramatic, you glance up and see a 19th century railway bridge stretching over the top of the falls, adding a touch of human history to the natural spectacle. But Rhine Falls isn't just about the waterfall itself. Right nearby, there's Schloss Laufen, an ancient castle perched on the cliffs above the falls. The castle dates back to the 9th century, and it's been beautifully preserved and turned into a museum where you can learn about the history of the region. It's incredible to think about how much history these waters have witnessed. Centuries of change, yet the waterfall remains constant, its roar echoing through the ages. Now, if you prefer something a little more serene but equally breathtaking, Lauterbrunnen village is the place to go. This valley is often called the Valley of 72 Waterfalls, and it's easy to see why. The moment you step into Lauterbrunnen, it feels like you've walked into a dream. Towering cliffs rise on either side, and thin ribbons of water cascade down from great heights, creating a tranquil, almost ethereal atmosphere. The most famous of these waterfalls is Staubbach Falls, which plunges nearly 300 meters from the cliffs above the village. It's one of the highest free-falling waterfalls in Europe, and watching the water drop from such a height, often turning into a fine mist before it reaches the ground, is mesmerizing. There's a peacefulness to Lauterbrunnen that's hard to describe. It's the kind of place that makes you want to slow down, take a deep breath, and just soak in the beauty around you. And it's no surprise that this valley served as inspiration for J.R.R. Tolkien's fictional Rivendell in The Lord of the Rings. As you walk along the quiet paths, surrounded by the sound of rushing water and the sight of lush greenery, it's easy to see why Tolkien fell in love with this place. It really does feel like you've stepped into a world of magic and fantasy. But Switzerland's waterfalls aren't all about size and power. Some of the most enchanting falls are the ones that you stumble upon by accident, tucked away in hidden corners of the country. Take the Reichenbach Falls, for example. This waterfall might not be as famous as Rhine Falls or as tall as Staubbach Falls, but it holds a special place in literary history. Fans of Sherlock Holmes will recognize Reichenbach Falls as the place where Holmes and his nemesis, Professor Moriarty, had their legendary final showdown in Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's stories. You can actually take a funicular railway up to the falls and stand in the exact spot where the fictional fight took place. For book lovers and nature enthusiasts alike, it's a thrilling and beautiful experience. Another lesser-known waterfall that's worth the trek is Sierenbach Falls. Located near the village of Amden, this series of waterfalls cascades down a cliffside in 3 distinct stages, making for a dramatic and picturesque sight. What's fascinating about Sierenbach Falls is that it's fed by an underground river that flows through a network of caves and tunnels before bursting out of the mountainside. You can almost hear the mystery of the hidden water sources as you stand there, watching the falls. The best time to visit is in the spring or early summer, when the snowmelt from the surrounding mountains makes the fall flow at their most powerful. The roar of the water fills the entire valley, and it's one of those natural experiences that leaves you speechless. Of course, no conversation about Swiss waterfalls would be complete without mentioning Trümmelbach Falls. Hidden inside a mountain in the Lauterbrunnen Valley, Trümmelbach Falls is a series of 10 waterfalls that thunder through the heart of the mountain. What makes these falls unique is that they're completely enclosed in the rock, carving out dramatic caverns and tunnels over thousands of years. Walking through the narrow passages, with the sound of rushing water echoing off the walls, is an adventure in itself. The falls carry the meltwater from the Eiger, Mönch and Jungfrau peaks, so the water is ice cold and crystal clear. It's one of those places where you feel like you're inside the mountain itself, witnessing the incredible power of nature up close. Waterfalls like these, hidden or not, offer more than just a visual spectacle. They also serve as reminders of the powerful forces that have shaped Switzerland's landscape. The interplay between water and rock, between nature's delicate beauty and its raw power, is what makes these places so captivating. Standing next to a waterfall, whether it's the thunderous Rhine Falls or the misty Staubbach Falls, you can't help but feel connected to the earth in a deeper way. And it's not just the waterfalls themselves that are fascinating. The stories and legends surrounding them add an extra layer of magic. In many Swiss villages, there are often tales of water nymphs and spirits that guard the waterfalls and the rivers. One of the most well-known legends is the tale of a water nymph who lives near Sierenbach Falls. Locals say that she protects the waterfall and its surroundings, and if anyone tries to harm the natural beauty of the place, she'll unleash the fury of the water. It's these kind of stories that gives the waterfall a life of their own, making them feel like more than just geological features. They become characters in the rich tapestry of Swiss folklore. If the lakes and waterfalls of Switzerland left you enchanted, wait until you dive into the country's incredible castles and historic structures. Switzerland, with its medieval charm, is a treasure trove of castles that feel like they're straight out of a storybook. These castles aren't just stone relics of the past. They're living monuments that have witnessed centuries of history, from the times of knights and battles to the peaceful museums and cultural landmarks they are today. Walking through these castles is like stepping back in time, and each one has its own unique story to tell. One of the most iconic castles in Switzerland is Château de Chillon, sitting majestically on the shores of Lake Geneva. I have to say, the first time I saw this castle, it took my breath away. Imagine a castle that looks like it's floating on water, surrounded by the blue expanse of the lake and framed by the towering Alps in the background. It's the kind of place that makes you feel like you're in a dream. Château de Chillon has been standing guard over Lake Geneva for centuries, and its walls have seen it all, from medieval battles to royal visitors. As you walk through its ancient halls and chambers, you can almost hear the echoes of the past. The castle dates back to the 12th century and was strategically built to control the passage between the north and south of Europe. It served as both a fortress and a residence for the Counts of Savoy. But Château de Chillon is just the beginning. Switzerland is home to countless other castles, each with its own history and charm. Take Schloss Laufen, perched on a cliff overlooking the Rhine Falls. While the falls are undoubtedly the main attraction, Schloss Laufen adds an extra layer of enchantment to the experience. The castle, which dates back to the 9th century, has undergone several transformations over the centuries. Today, it is a beautifully restored museum where you can learn about the region's history and take in stunning views of the falls from above. Then there's Thun Castle, another gem that's nestled in the town of Thun, overlooking Lake Thun. Thun Castle is the kind of place that makes you feel like a kid again, imagining knights in shining armor and medieval banquets. Built in the 12th century, it is one of the best preserved castles in Switzerland, and the views from its towers are simply breathtaking. As you climb the spiral staircases to the top, you're rewarded with a panoramic view of the lake and the snow-capped mountains in the distance. It's easy to see why this location was chosen for such a fortress. It commands the entire region from its hilltop perch. What I love about Swiss castles is that they're not just cold stone fortresses. They're often surrounded by beautiful gardens and parks that invite you to slow down and take in the beauty of your surroundings. One castle that does this perfectly is Oberhofen Castle, also located on Lake Thun. The castle's picturesque setting, with its tower rising from the water's edge, makes it one of the most photographed castles in Switzerland. But if you're a fan of history, you can't miss the Bellinzona Castles, a UNESCO World Heritage Site in the Italian-speaking region of Ticino. Bellinzona is home to 3 castles, Castel Grande, Montebello, and Sasso Corbaro, that stand proudly over the town, their stone walls and towers rising against the skyline. These castles were once vital military fortifications, controlling access to the Alpine passes between northern Europe and Italy. Castel Grande, the largest and oldest of the 3, dates back to the Roman times and has been beautifully restored. The castle's thick stone walls, winding staircases, and expansive courtyards transport you back to a time when defending territory was a matter of life and death. One of the things that make the Bellinzona castles so special is how well preserved they are. Walking through them, you can almost picture the soldiers patrolling the ramparts, the merchants passing through the gates, and the daily life of a medieval town unfolding beneath the castle walls. The views from the castle are equally impressive. You can see for miles across the Ticino Valley, taking in the rolling hills and distant mountains. It's no wonder that these castles are considered some of the best examples of medieval military architecture in Europe. What's fascinating about Swiss castles is how they blend history with the natural beauty that surrounds them. Many castles were built to take advantage of Switzerland's rugged landscape, using cliffs, rivers, and lakes as natural defenses. It's this seamless integration of nature and architecture that makes visiting these castles such a magical experience. Of course, not all castles are perched high on hills or overlooking lakes. Some are hidden away in valleys, surrounded by forests and mountains, waiting to be discovered. One such place is the enchanting Kyburg Castle, located in the canton of Zurich. Kyburg is one of the oldest and most important castles in Switzerland, and it has been carefully preserved to showcase medieval life. Inside, you'll find everything, from a medieval kitchen to grand halls filled with period furniture. Another hidden gem is Gruyère Castle, located in the heart of the Swiss countryside. Yes, it's the same Gruyère famous for its cheese, and the castle itself is every bit as charming as the town. Built in the 13th century, Gruyère Castle looks like something out of a fairy tale, with its towers, turrets, and beautiful gardens. Inside, the castle is filled with works of art, including stunning frescoes and tapestries that tell the story of the region's rich history. The views from the castle's ramparts stretch out over the rolling hills and farmlands, making it easy to see why this spot was chosen for such a grand residence. What's amazing about Switzerland is that many of these castles are still very much alive. They're not just empty ruins. They've been restored and repurposed as museums, cultural centers, or even hotels. In some cases, you can even spend the night in a castle, sleeping in rooms that once housed royalty or knights. Imagine waking up to the sounds of birds chirping, stepping out onto a stone balcony, and looking out over the same landscape that kings and queens once gazed upon. It's like stepping into another world. For me, What makes exploring these castles so special is that each one offers a different glimpse into Switzerland's past. After wandering through Switzerland's castles and historic landmarks, you start to realize that this country is like a treasure chest filled with wonders at every turn. But while the architecture and history are undeniably fascinating, it's the country's incredible wildlife and natural landscapes that truly steal the show. Switzerland is more than just picturesque villages and medieval fortresses. It's also home to some of the most diverse and unique flora and fauna in Europe. The animals that roam these mountains and valleys have adapted to the harsh, rugged terrain of the Swiss Alps, and seeing them in their natural habitat is a reminder of the untamed beauty that still exists in this world. One of the most iconic animals in Switzerland is the alpine ibex. If you've never seen one of these creatures, you're in for a treat. Picture a wild goat with long curved horns that seem almost too big for its body. But these horns aren't just for show, they're a key tool for survival. The ibex lives high up in the Alps, where the rugged cliffs and steep terrain would seem impossible to navigate. Yet, these animals move through the mountains with ease, using their specially adapted hooves to grip onto the smallest cracks and ledges. It's amazing to watch them in action, leaping effortlessly from one rock to another, balancing on sheer vertical walls as if gravity doesn't exist. The ibex is more than just a mountain climbing marvel. It's also a symbol of conservation success. Back in the early 19th century, the ibex was almost hunted to extinction. People believed that the animal's horns had medicinal properties, and its meat was highly prized, leading to widespread hunting. By the 1800s, the ibex had disappeared from Switzerland entirely. But thanks to the conservation efforts and the reintroduction of the species from Italy, the alpine ibex has made a remarkable comeback. Today, there are more than 55,000 ibex roaming the Alps, a true success story that shows what's possible when humans and nature work together. Another animal that thrives in the high-altitude environment of the Alps is the marmot. These chubby, furry creatures might not be as famous as the ibex, but they're equally fascinating. Marmots live in large underground burrows that they dig into the mountainsides, and during the warmer months, you can often spot them sunbathing on rocks or foraging for food in the alpine meadows. One of the coolest things about the marmots is that they hibernate for up to 7 months of the year. Before winter comes, they bulk up by eating as much as they can, building up fat reserves that will keep them alive during the long cold months when they're huddled in their burrows. I remember the first time I saw a marmot in the wild. It was late summer, and I was hiking in the Bernese Alps. Suddenly, I heard this high-pitched whistle coming from somewhere nearby. It took me a few minutes to realize it was a marmot, sounding the alarm to warn the rest of its colony that there were humans nearby. Sure enough, a few moments later, I spotted one sitting on a rock, keeping a watchful eye on me. It's little moments like these that remind you how connected the animals are to their environment, always on alert, always in tune with the rhythms of nature. But it's not just the furry animals that capture our attention in the Swiss Alps. There are also some pretty spectacular birds of prey. One of the most impressive is the golden eagle, a bird that commands the skies with its massive wingspan and keen hunting skills. Seeing a golden eagle in flight is an experience you won't soon forget. These birds can soar for hours on the wind currents, scanning the ground below for prey. And when they spot something, whether it's a rabbit, a squirrel, or even a larger mammal, they swoop down with incredible speed and precision, their sharp talons ready to strike. The golden eagle has long been associated with power and majesty, and in the Greek mythology, it was considered the personal messenger of Zeus, the king of the gods. Watching one of these birds in action, it's easy to see why. There's something regal about the way they move, their piercing eyes always focused, their wings cutting through the air like they own the skies. They're the ultimate symbol of freedom and strength, perfectly at home in the rugged wilderness of the Alps. But the golden eagle isn't the only bird of prey that calls the Alps home. The Eurasian eagle owl, with its striking orange eyes and distinctive ear tufts, is another formidable hunter. These owls are mostly nocturnal, and they use their incredible hearing and night vision to hunt in the dark. What's fascinating about the Eurasian eagle owl is that each one has its own unique voice, which they use to communicate with each other across the mountains. If you're lucky enough to hear one of these owls calling out in the dead of night, it's a haunting, otherworldly sound that sends shivers down your spine. Switzerland is also home to one of the most fascinating birds you'll ever encounter, the bearded vulture. Unlike most vultures which feed on carrion, the bearded vulture has a very specific diet: bones. That's right, this bird of prey feeds almost exclusively on the bones of dead animals, and it has a unique way of getting to the nutritious marrow inside. The bearded vulture will carry a large bone high into the air, then drop it onto the rocks below, shattering it into smaller pieces. Once the bone is broken, the vulture swoops down to pick up the fragments and feast on the marrow. It's a gruesome but incredibly effective feeding strategy, and watching it in action is both fascinating and a little bit eerie. One of the most remarkable things about the wildlife in Switzerland is how well adapted they are to their environment. The animals of the Alps have evolved over thousands of years to survive in some of the harshest conditions on Earth, from freezing winters to steep rocky terrain. Take the mountain hare, for example. In the summer, these small, nimble creatures blend into the surroundings with their brown fur, making it easy to hide from predators. But when winter arrives, the mountain hare undergoes a dramatic transformation. Its fur turns pure white, allowing it to blend seamlessly into the snow-covered landscape. This clever camouflage helps the hare avoid predators like the bearded vulture and the golden eagle, both of which are constantly on the lookout for their next meal. Of course, it's not just the animals that make Switzerland's natural world so special. The plant life is equally diverse and unique. The alpine meadows that stretch across the high-altitude regions of the Alps are home to some of the most beautiful and hardy flowers you'll ever see. One of the most famous is the Edelweiss, a small white flower that has become a symbol of Switzerland itself. The Edelweiss grows in some of the most remote and rocky areas of the Alps, and its delicate petals seem almost out of place in such a rugged environment. But this little flower is tough. It's adapted to survive in extreme cold and high altitudes, making it a true survivor in the harsh alpine conditions. Then there's the alpine rose, a bright pinkish-red flower that adds a splash of color to the rocky slopes of the Alps. It blooms in the summer months, creating a striking contrast against the gray and green backdrop of the mountains. The alpine rose is one of those plants that seems to embody the spirit of the Alps. Resilient, beautiful, and perfectly suited to the environment in which it grows. Switzerland's wildlife and plant life are more than just a pretty backdrop to the mountains. They're an integral part of what makes this country so unique. Whether it's the sight of an alpine ibex scaling a cliff, the sound of a marmot whistling a warning, or the graceful flight of a golden eagle, the animals of the Alps remind you that this is a place where nature still reigns supreme. It's a world where survival is a daily challenge, and every creature, no matter how big or small, has a role to play in the delicate balance of life in the mountains. There's something truly magical about gliding through the heart of the Alps on a train, watching as the mountains, valleys, and lakes unfold in front of you like scenes from a postcard. Switzerland's railways are more than just a means of getting from one place to another. They're a journey in themselves, offering some of the most breathtaking views you'll ever experience. One of the most iconic train rides in the world is the Glacier Express. Despite the name, this isn't an express train in the traditional sense. It's actually known as the slowest express train in the world. But trust me, that's a good thing. The Glacier Express takes you on a leisurely ride through some of the most spectacular scenery in the Swiss Alps, traveling from Zermatt to St. Moritz in about 8 hours. As you sit back in the comfortable panoramic carriages, you pass through deep gorges, high-altitude passes, and picturesque villages, all while the towering Alps loom above you. What makes the Glacier Express so special is the way it connects two of Switzerland's most famous mountain resorts, Zermatt, home to the iconic Matterhorn, and St. Moritz, known for its glamorous ski culture. But it's the journey itself that steals the show. Along the way, you cross 291 bridges, pass through 91 tunnels, and climb to an altitude of over 2,000 meters. One of the highlights of the trip is crossing the Landwasser Viaduct, a dramatic curving stone bridge that seems to defy gravity as it spans a deep gorge. The viaduct is an engineering marvel, and seeing it for the first time is one of those moments that makes you gasp. And it's not just the Glacier Express that offers these kind of views. Switzerland is crisscrossed by an extensive network of railways that connect even the most remote mountain villages. Some of these railways are marvels of engineering, winding through the Alps on tracks that seem almost impossible to build. One such line is the Bernina Express, which takes you from the Swiss town of Chur across the Bernina Pass to Tirano in Italy. This train route is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and for good reason. The scenery along the Bernina Express is nothing short of spectacular, with towering glaciers, turquoise lakes, and rugged mountain peaks all within view as the train climbs to altitudes of over 2,200 meters. What's particularly impressive about the Bernina Express is how seamlessly it blends into the landscape. The train climbs steep grades without the need for cogwheels, and it crosses bridges and viaducts that offer sweeping views of the valleys below. One of the most famous is the Brusio Spiral Viaduct, a circular bridge that the train loops around in order to manage the steep descent into the valley. Watching the train wind around the spiral is a mesmerizing sight, and it's a testament to the ingenuity of Swiss engineers who designed these railways to conquer the difficult terrain. Another railway that deserves a mention is the Jungfraujoch Railway, also known as the Top of Europe. This isn't just a train ride. It's an ascent to one of the highest points in Europe. The Jungfraujoch Railway takes you to the Jungfraujoch station, which sits at a staggering 3,454 meters above sea level, making it the highest railway station in Europe. The journey starts in the charming village of Lautenbrunnen, and as the train climbs higher and higher, the scenery becomes more and more dramatic. Once you reach the top, you step out into a world of snow and ice, surrounded by the peaks of the Bernese Alps. One of the highlights of the trip is visiting the Sphinx Observatory, a research station perched on a rocky outcrop that offers panoramic views of the Aletsch Glacier, the longest glacier in Europe. It's hard to describe the feeling of standing at the top of Europe with the wind whipping through your hair and the vast expanse of snow and ice stretching out before you. It's one of those moments where you feel truly humbled by the power and beauty of nature. Of course, railways aren't the only engineering marvels in Switzerland. The country is also home to some of the most impressive bridges you'll ever see. We've already talked about the Landwasser Viaduct, but there are plenty of other bridges that deserve a mention. One of my favorites is the Trift Bridge, a suspension bridge that spans the Trift Glacier in the Bernese Alps. This isn't your typical bridge. It's a narrow, swaying walkway that stretches for 170 meters across a deep gorge, offering immense views of the glacier and the surrounding mountains. Walking across the Trift Bridge is not for the faint of heart. As you step onto the wooden planks, the bridge sways slightly in the wind, and you can't help but feel a rush of adrenaline. But once you reach the middle, the views are worth every moment of vertigo. Below you, the Trift Glacier glistens in the sunlight, and all around you, the rugged peaks of the Alps rise up like giants. It's an experience that makes you feel like you're on top of the world, both figuratively and literally. But it's not just the big dramatic bridges that make Switzerland's infrastructure so impressive. Even the smaller, understated bridges are marvels of engineering. Take the Kapellbrücke, or Chapel Bridge, in Lucerne. This charming covered wooden bridge is one of the oldest in Europe, dating back to the 14th century. It's not just a functional bridge, it's a piece of history adorned with paintings that depict scenes from Lucerne's past. Walking across the bridge, with the water of Lake Lucerne gently lapping below, feels like stepping back in time. It's a reminder that Switzerland's beauty isn't just found in its natural landscapes, but also in the craftsmanship of its people. What I love most about traveling by train and crossing these incredible bridges is that it gives you a chance to see Switzerland from a different perspective. You're not just passing through the country, you're immersing yourself in its landscapes, experiencing the mountains, valleys, and rivers in a way that's both intimate. It's the kind of experience that stays with you long after you've returned home, the kind of experience that makes you fall in love with Switzerland all over again. After experiencing the majestic mountains, stunning lakes, cascading waterfalls, historic castles, unique wildlife, and impressive railways and bridges, you start to realize that Switzerland is not just a place, it's an experience. But there's still one more aspect of this country that adds to its magic: the Swiss villages and the rich cultural heritage that's alive and well in every corner of the land. These villages, nestled between towering mountains and lush valleys, are not only picturesque, but also steeped in history and tradition. They offer a window into the heart of Switzerland, where time seems to slow down and life revolves around the rhythms of nature. One of the most beautiful and well-known villages in Switzerland. As you approach Lauterbrunnen, it feels like you're stepping into a postcard. The village is set in a deep valley surrounded by towering cliffs, and 72 waterfalls cascade down from the cliffs above. It's easy to see why Lauterbrunnen has been called one of the most spectacular valleys in Europe. The sound of the waterfalls fills the air, blending with the peaceful atmosphere of the village, where traditional Swiss chalets line the narrow streets and vibrant flowers bloom in every window box. Lauterbrunnen is a place where nature and village life exist in perfect harmony. The beauty of the place is overwhelming, and there's something about walking through the quiet streets with the sound of the Staubach Falls in the background that makes you feel like you found a hidden paradise. It's no wonder that J.R.R. Tolkien drew inspiration from Lauterbrunnen when he created Rivendell in The Lord of the Rings. There's a sense of otherworldly magic here that makes you believe anything is possible. Just up the mountain from Lauterbrunnen, you'll find the car-free village of Miran. Accessible only by cable car or train, Miran is perched high above the village and offers some of the most breathtaking views of the Alps. As you walk through the village, it feels like time has stood still. There are no cars, no hustle and bustle, just the sound of cowbells echoing through the air and the stunning sight of the Eiger, Mönch and Jungfrau peaks rising in the distance. Miran is the kind of place where you can truly escape from the world, surrounded by the beauty of the mountains and the simplicity of Swiss village life. And then there's Grindelwald, another village nestled in the shadow of the Eiger. Grindelwald has long been a hub for adventurers, hikers and climbers who come to explore the surrounding mountains. But it's also a place where you can experience the warmth and hospitality of Swiss culture. The village is filled with charming wooden chalets, cozy restaurants serving traditional Swiss dishes like fondue and raclette, and friendly locals who are always happy to share a story or two about life in the Alps. Grindelwald is one of those places that feels like home, even if it's your first time visiting. It's the perfect blend of nature and comfort, where the call of the mountains is balanced by the coziness of village life. But Switzerland isn't just about the mountains and the famous villages. It's also about the small, hidden places that most tourists never get to see. Take Kippel, for example, a tiny village in the Lötschental Valley. With a population of just a few hundred people, Kippel is one of the smallest and most remote villages in Switzerland, but it's also one of the most charming. The village is made up of traditional wooden houses, many of which are over 400 years old, and it's surrounded by the stunning peaks of the Alps. Walking through Kippel feels like stepping back in time, and it's easy to imagine what life was like here centuries ago. It's this sense of continuity, of holding on to the past while embracing the present, that makes Swiss villages so unique. Another village that's rich in tradition is Zermatt. Located at the foot of the Matterhorn, Zermatt is one of the most famous mountain villages in the world. But beyond the ski resorts and high-end shops, Zermatt is a village with a deep sense of history. The Matterhorn has been attracting climbers and adventurers for over a century, and the village itself has a long history of mountaineering. Walking through the narrow streets of Zermatt, you'll find old mountaineering equipment hanging on the walls of chalets, along with photos and stories of the climbers who came here to conquer the Matterhorn. The village is a blend of past and present, where the rugged spirit of adventure is balanced by the charm of a traditional Swiss village. What's amazing about these villages is that, despite the modernization that has taken place in much of the world, they have managed to retain their authenticity. Many of the villages in Switzerland are still home to families who have lived there for generations, and they continue to follow the rhythms of rural life, farming, tending to livestock, and preparing for the changing seasons. Even in the more tourist-heavy areas like Zermatt or Grindelwald, there's a strong sense of community and a deep respect for the traditions that have shaped these places for centuries. So, what are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments below.